Donald Trump's long address at the 80th session of the UNGA in New York. So Donald Trump revived his attack on renewable energy in a rather bizarre claim. Donald Trump called renewables a joke and climate change a con job.
Climate change. Because if it goes higher or lower, whatever the hell happens, there's climate change. It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion. The carbon footprint is a hoax made up by people with evil intentions, and they're heading down a path of total destruction. You know, the carbon footprint was a big, big thing.
And now let's connect to our correspondent from Washington, D.C., Saurabh Shukla. Hi, Saurabh. So in his address at the UNGA, President Trump criticized the United Nations for failing to help peace efforts, also failing to stop uncontrolled migration. Your views on that assessment and what it means for the United Nations and global migration?
Well, that's classic President Trump for you. You know, I can tell you that he started off even before that with taking a dig at the UN on a faulty escalator to a teleprompter not working. So that evoked a pool of laughter to otherwise a gathering which is more serious. On climate change, this is something, you know, in fact, I'm here in Washington, D.C., White House officials always tell me that, you know, he goes by what he personally believes in. And he's been somebody who has been shunning away the renewables energy and also been speaking against it. And that stems from a belief that the energy, the U.S. energy sources like oil, coal, they should be encouraged more, and that is what works. That's the reason why he has done away with EV tax subsidy here in the US, and also his speech underscores what he has been saying all along. So that was not unexpected, I would say. But obviously, he also had a dig in some ways at the UN, because UN has been focusing a lot on sustainability, climate change, and things like that. And there are other speakers, other world leaders after him, like Indonesian President I saw, who were obviously speaking about the effect of climate change. But this is classic President Trump. One of the other things I thought also from the speech which stood out was that he says, I do business with people I like, in reference to President Lula of Brazil. But I want to put in context of India, where obviously he has been saying that he has a great relationship with Prime Minister Modi. So certainly, I think, leave aside what he says in the speech, but I see behind the speech, there is a hidden, I would say, indication as well that obviously he values his chemistry with world leaders. And that is where I see a big ray of hope for US-India ties with the chemistry that he has with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and the fact that he had that phone call with the Prime Minister, and obviously our relationship now is bouncing back on an even keel. In fact, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar had a very good meeting with Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, as well. So I think a lot is happening on that part as well.
Yes, so I wanted to ask you about that meeting between External Affairs Minister Jaishankar and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. What all has transpired in the meeting?
Well, it was very important, because I would say, and I was talking to my sources here and obviously in New York as well, from both sides, and they tell me that it was a very positive meeting. It also heralds, I would say, the US-India ties to the next level. Because what happened was that obviously, as you know, there were hiccups on the way after a great visit by the Prime Minister. But the Prime Minister and President Trump has already spoken. They have given a green light, so to say, to their interlocutors, which are External Affairs Minister Jaishankar in this case, and Marco Rubio. Parallel track, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal is also meeting with the US trade representative. So I think where a lot of naysayers were saying that the US-India relationship was going on a downhill, I think not only it's bouncing back, but India's core concerns, whether it on trade, on other strategic issues, that are being argued in a firm-footed manner. And I think US has also realized that India is a valued friend and an ally, but they will agree to disagree on certain issues because India will value its own national interest ahead of anything else. And as Prime Minister has been repeatedly saying that he has the foremost thing in his mind is the interest of Indian people, and whether it's buying, even on the issue of oil, buying of Russian oil. India has made it very clear that if US was to provide India cheaper alternative or cheaper oil, obviously, India can look at the sources in the US as well. So I would say what has come out of these meetings is that on issues like trade, defense, Indo-Pacific, strategic cooperation, also on multilateral issues, US and India see eye to eye. And in the next few months, you will see a further momentum and consolidation of these ties as the two countries put their, whatever interest is there at the heart of this entire conversation, and also the issues where they disagree on. But it's a very positive development, if you ask me.
All right, we'll leave it here. Thank you very much, Saurabh Shukla, for your analysis on both these subjects. Also, now let me bring in Ambassador Manjeev Singh Puri, former senior Indian diplomat, on the proceedings so far at the UN General Assembly. Manjeev ji, if you can hear me, welcome to the show, sir. So, ahead of the UN General Assembly, President Trump has said that he believes recognition of a Palestinian state rewards Hamas. But UN Chief Antonio Guterres has stated that statehood for Palestinians is a right, not a reward. Now, are these positions reconcilable, and what does the answer mean for peace in West Asia? Ambassador Puri, please request you to unmute yourself. We are unable to hear you.
Yeah. Tanvi, thank you. Tanvi, the United Nations is a place where convergences, when they happen, they are very good, but people live with divergence. The idea, over 150 members of the UN, including India, recognize the state of Palestine. The United States doesn't, it can't get full membership of the UN. And so this is continuing. But in the context of Gaza and what has been happening there, President Trump has reiterated what many from the American side have said. It's Hamas. They are not talking about the fact that 85,000 people have been killed, that the United Nations' own operations have been completely hampered and finished, that they are themselves making the most critical references, that the International Court of Justice has ruled against it. But look, that's the nature of global power play. And so that's what we are seeing. Will the recognition by the UK and the others, etc., do? Well, it does make some kind of a symbolic movement. But frankly, it's a situation which requires doing things really, not just talking, but walking the talk. And I am not really seeing much in that direction.
Okay, looking at President Trump's speech, he spoke of Iran's nuclear weapon efforts, the need to stop the war in Gaza, also to stop the crisis in Ukraine. He called on Europe to stop buying energy from Russia, something he has said in his most public appearances. Of course, not to forget his claim of ending multiple unendable wars. Probably he wants a thank you from United Nations as well.
Well, they don't give the Nobel Prize, so what can I say about that? And I believe in the middle of his speech, he said, I want the prize, but no, I have to save life. Yeah. Well, very good. The world's greatest con guy is saying the greatest existentialist threat is a con job. So what do you want me to say about it? Look, he has said things which are exactly what he has done and what he has stated repeatedly from the pulpit of the Oval Office, the White House lawns, etc., etc. His views on Iran are well known to everybody. We should stop the war in Gaza. Please tell me what the United States, the one country with true equities, especially on that country which is really the country that matters, Israel. What have they done about it? The fact is precious little. So I'm afraid this is one of the most challenging times in the history of the United Nations. When it started off, there was contestation, the USSR and the Americans on two sides, the so-called G2 of those days. Then you had the collapse of the USSR. Everybody thought multilateralism all to the fore. But this kind of challenge of trying to move at it with a wrecking ball, saying that you didn't accept my renovation bid and accepted somebody else's bid, your teleprompter is not working. Come on, we all know that. But he's the president of the United States. So no matter what we say, poo-poo and so on and so forth, The fact of the matter is that he is in command of the world's most strongest country, strongest army, strongest defense force, strongest money power economy. And so therefore, I'm afraid we have to pay attention to him and hope that, even within all of what he says, there are ways that can be found forward for global good, for the American good, for everybody else's good too.
Okay. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for strengthening the United Nations for the 21st century. He made these statements at the opening of the UNGA. Why do you see he has made this call now? Do you see this world body strengthening or gradually weakening even more than it has so far? And if so, why?
Tanvi, this is the 80th anniversary. You would have expected every single world leader to come. Honorable Prime Minister also chose not to go there. Reasons are quite obvious to us. They, I think, have more to do with bilateralism with the United States and, hopefully things going forward on that side. But, that not being the situation as of now. The Chinese president hasn't come. The Russian president hasn't come out there. So, two of the permanent 5 members are missing. This is the state of play. Look, as I said, this is an extremely challenging time for the United Nations. The Gaza war, many people are using the word genocide, etc. for it. That is truly debilitating, and quite apart from the long drawn-out conflict of the Russians and the Ukrainians and all of this that has been going on. So, very, very challenging time. But look, I am a convinced multilateralist, and I have a very simple view. If the UN didn't exist, all right, we'll have to invent it. We can call it whatever else. President Trump ended his speech by not saying God bless the United Nations, but saying God bless the nations of the world. Well, perfectly fine. We can find another name. But do we need global governance? The answer is absolutely yes.
Okay. So reflecting on the addresses made so far in the UNGA, especially that by President Trump, what do they augur for the UN and UN stated goals and the world, sir? Very quickly.
So, Tanvi, look, the only address that matters, everybody else along predicted lines. Mr. Trump also. But, he is the host, the largest paymaster into the UN, although the Chinese are coming very close to that. But the fact of the matter is, when the President of the United Nations, raises hundreds of questions the very ideas of things that have happened, wants to challenge the ideas of sustainability. SDGs is the biggest thing that the world has been talking about in the last decade or so. Then you have to admit great challenges. And the Secretary General rightly has called for doing something. But this is an extremely challenging time for the nations of the world, the largest and most important nations of the world, because certainly the most important country is, what should I say, playing in a sense truant to ideas which have been actually started by the United Nations, the United States. Good reasons, that's a different matter. We can talk about it. But, disruptive nature, that's certainly the case. So very challenging, but let's also believe in this adage, this too shall pass.
Okay, this too shall pass. On that note, let's wind up this discussion. Thank you very much for your time, Ambassador Manjeet Puri.